Hello, you're watching the Press Preview. It is our first look at tomorrow's front pages, and tonight we will check out the headlines with the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and also a former Conservative MP who's now Chief Executive of the charity Business in the Community, Mary Macleod. So chatting to them in a moment, but first of all, let's take a look at those front pages for you. We're going to begin with the Metro. Reacting to today's widespread travel disruption, the paper has the headline, Air Traffic Computer Chaos. And it's the same story for tomorrow's FT, which suggests the backlog could take a while to clear. Days of chaos after air traffic control meltdown. That's the headline on the front of the Express. And in fact, similar words on the Eye, which also quotes sources from Number 10 saying a cyber attack being the cause is a good working assumption. Travel disruption also featuring, as you can see, on the front of the Telegraph, and the Daily Mail flight fiasco to go on for days is the rather depressing headline. Get me out of the air is the Sun's take on it. And the Times also saying disruption could last for days until at least Friday. Well, it's a different story on the front of the Mirror on rail ticket office closures and the impact that they will have on elderly customers. From The Guardian, rivers at risk. And the Star splashes on controversy surrounding the Spanish football chief Luis Rubiales and how his mum has gone on a hunger strike in his defence in a church. And don't forget, you can scan that QR code that you see on screen during the programme. Check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And to do that this evening, Zoe Williams and Mary Macleod here in the studio. Lovely to see you on this Bank Holiday Monday. Very exciting. So let's start then, shall we, with the travel chaos, a story which broke this morning and has left so many people stranded. It has now been fixed, but of course there's a massive backlog as aircraft are in the wrong places.
It's so interesting, just from a news perspective, that there's very little for them. That, you know, no newspaper can shed any light on what happened. Nobody knows yet. They're kind of pretty sure that there was no malfeasance. They're pretty sure that it wasn't a hack attack. They're pretty sure that it was just an accident. But sometimes the papers just have to reflect what people's experiences are, and they're quite uncomfortable with it because you know, there's not a lot to say except what an incredible inconvenience that must be to be stranded for 12 hours. And yet it's on the front of every newspaper, you know, because it's a huge, big deal. It's like, this is people's summer holidays.
Yeah, and to happen on a bank holiday is particularly bad because so many of us are relying on getting to places we need to get to or getting home.
Oh, absolutely, and because we don't know how many days this will take to resolve. So if it's just a slight delay in a flight, most people can handle that. But if flights are cancelled, trying to find another flight, and it could be days, we just don't know. So it's the personal impact and inconvenience, and it's UK PLC, it's everything that in terms of the economy as well. And this just doesn't look good for Britain, that we have this. And it's a lot of airports affected, a lot of flights. So, you know, they do need to really understand and get under the skin of how it happened, why it happened. They say they don't think it's a cyber attack, but then there are technical glitches, and I used to build systems, so these things sometimes happen, but it's like really understanding.
But this needs to be foolproof, doesn't it? I mean, there are some things that you can accept. That you know, can accept issues going wrong, but when it comes to planes in the sky...
Yeah, and it's about safety, so it's massively important.
But do you think it does look bad for the UK? Do you think it looks like, you know, part of a package of the whole United Kingdom being kind of a little bit swamped and chaotic? Or do you think it's just something that could happen to any country?
It could, and it's happened to other countries. It happened to France some time ago. I mean, so it does happen, and people sort of understand sometimes technology goes wrong, but at the same time, it's the overall, I think, look of it, that it's just another thing over on top of lots of other things that aren't going right at the moment. But arguably, they could solve it quite quickly if they just, you know, really understand where the problem was, but also find out where is the infrastructure investment, what is the backup plan. They would always do stress testing, do risk analysis. They would they should have all those processes in place. So what happened here and why did all those flights have to be cancelled? And it includes, because it's the UK and 14 airports, but it's also that oceanic bit, so the west, the northeast of the Atlantic in essence. So a lot of planes are flying into that airspace.
Yeah, of course, the knock-on effect is global, isn't it, of this? We shall find out more, I'm sure, in coming days. Let's move on to the FT, Zoe, the latest twist in the Donald Trump saga. A trial date has been set, and it's quite a significant day.
Well, quite. I mean, Trump would have been hoping, and this is sort of magical thinking on his part, but he would have been hoping that he could have kicked the trial dates to after the Super Tuesday, when the Republicans choose their candidate. Indeed, he was hoping to kick the trial dates until after the election, so that he could win the election, according to him, and then pardon himself of any federal charge. Now, technically, there's no problem with him doing that. There's no kind of constitutional problem with him doing that, even though it's obviously completely unprecedented in American history. But there's a massive problem with him doing it if the trial is before the election even happens, if the trial is before the Republican candidacy is even chosen, because he faces the really unlovely prospect of actually being found guilty before he has a chance to secure the nomination, in which case whoever does get chosen probably won't pardon him. So this is extremely dicey for him. And if he had, some kind of sense of reason, he would be worried. Whether or not he is, history doesn't relate.
Yeah, set for 4th of March, the eve of Super Tuesday.
Yeah, and of course he'll always make out that he's not worried at all and that this is all a conspiracy and a witch hunt against him. But the incredible thing is that the poll numbers rise for him. With every issue like this that comes up, it just... And so...
It is quite terrifying, actually, because he's building this whole martyr narrative where he's, being burnt at the stake of the kind of liberal orthodoxy and everything's a lie and he's the only person telling the truth and the election was rigged and et cetera, et cetera. And so almost the worse things go for him, the more his narrative of persecution is reinforced. And you do see his numbers go up. But the truth is, the judges can't behave other than they adjudicate.
But do you not think the district attorneys are also... We were talking about this a couple of days ago. The DAs are politicising the law as well, aren't they, by pushing this?
Are they, though? I mean, you have to... At some stage, if the rule of law means anything at all, you have to prosecute it to the limits of its capability.
And there are certain things he does have to answer to.
You can't say, well, it's going to look bad if we prosecute him, therefore it doesn't matter whether he incited the storming of the Capitol. It's just not going to fly.
But he'll probably get the nomination, and so...
No, do you think so? I mean, if he's actually...
I think he probably will, but...
Because there's a lot of Republicans who know which side their bread is buttered, and they're not going to want to fight an election with a guy in prison.
Yeah.
No one's standing out of the pack so far, though, are they?
No, I mean...
That's the other issue. Let's move on to politics back at home. And the Daily Express, 2 pages inside about how the Home Secretary plans to tackle the small boats. What's the latest plan, Zoe?
Well, this is actually the most straightforward and upfront Braverman has been, certainly today. She gave some very squirrely interviews earlier in the day in which, she was asked directly if the European Court of Human Rights objects to the small boats policy, whether that's Rwanda, whether that's the, Bibi Stockholm, whatever that is, if you meet resistance from Europe, what is your response going to be? And she was giving this weird answer, which was, everybody knows where I stand vis-à-vis the European Court of Human Rights. Now, essentially, she's ahead of being fired by Rishi Sunak, trying to prepare the ground as the person who wants to take us out of the ECHR, right? I mean, that's how she's trying to frame herself. And she can't say it out loud because it's not government policy. But she does want to say it out loud because she wants to mark herself out as the person who thinks that. So this is some massive fighting talk from her.
And today there was other things like the tagging, where it's not government policy, but yet she's putting those things out there as that there's things that are part of all the raft of things that she will look at to try and resolve this. I mean, keep in mind, this is one of the big 5 things, and 3 of them are economic. So one of the other big things that the Prime Minister is saying we are going to sort, we're going to stop the boats. I mean, that is quite a declaration to say, and I think we all want something sorted on this because it's lives that are being lost as part of it. So whichever side you look at it, you know, something has to be done. But and so I think what she'll want to be seen is that she's taking action, or that she's showing that she's trying to do something.
The thing is, though, she doesn't have time before the next election to take us out of the European Court of Human Rights. There's absolutely no way. So if she's sabre-rattling like this, she's not doing so as a member of the serving Conservative government. She's doing so as the leader of the next opposition. And that's definitely where she's headed with this. She's just trying to kind of cast herself as that person who will be the next face of the Conservative Party.
Really interesting.
Which I think would be a disaster for the Conservative Party.
We've just got 30 seconds left, and it'd be nice to reflect on this Notting Hill Carnival. Did you go, Mary?
I didn't, and I feel ashamed I didn't, because I've been before and absolutely loved it. And of course, this year was a special moment because of the anniversary or for Windrush, and therefore, you know, something that we absolutely need to keep remembering. There's all the celebrations and the vibrancy and the music and everything that goes with the Notting Hill Carnival, but there's a serious message underneath that we've got to remember all the what happened with the Windrush generation, about them coming into the country, and therefore, you know, are we supporting them in the right way possible, and giving them what they deserve as part of that. So I think it's important to keep remembering that the Windrush story underneath it.
Yeah. What do you think, Zoe? Well, we've got some pictures. Well, I wonder what that noise was. It's the band.
I mean, it's not just Windrush, is it? It's like every single year the carnival happens, it's sort of, it makes the point that this used to be an extremely divided event, full of tension, full of racial tension, going back 50 years, 60 years, and it has turned into an incredibly united, beautiful thing. And I think, you know, people take a lot from that, even if there are still so many unresolved things with Windrush, with Grenfell, even with that standing. It's a beautiful thing to see.
And we see it as in business with, you know, we've got a race charter that over 1,000 companies have signed up to. People are saying we want to be united in this. We want to do something and make sure we're putting the right policies in place to help those who have come into this country or who have got, of course, any sort of ethnic minority heritage. Really, really important as part of this. But people are getting behind it and supporting.
It's positive to hear that, but many people would say we're still a very intolerant nation, and that we are, in many aspects, a racist nation still. But you're saying you don't believe that?
I mean, I think there's a huge amount of racist language that bandied about for political gains. It's certainly by the kind of new right. If you just look at the Conservative candidate for London Mayor, she's spoken like openly racist terms about the Notting Hill Carnival and how it was predisposed to violence. And Labour MPs complained about that this week because it was the language was kind of scary. No. So I'm not saying there isn't still racism doesn't still have currency in politics, but I think the actual underlying, as a nation, we're disgusted by it. I think we really are.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the good thing, is that we're disgusted by it. But there's still some, awful stories of people with people who have racist attacks or racist comments. So there is still racism in this country. So the more that we can do to try and lift that narrative up and make people more aware of it, as we're doing with the race charter, it really is important to say what more can be done to make sure there is a really united force, and if people aren't feeling that they're included, then we need to do something about it.
I'm sure she would deny that she's racist, but certainly there has been concern about those comments. Thank you both for the moment. Plenty more still to come on the press preview, including this story. It is in the Guardian, I think, sexual assault inquiry over football chief's kiss, talking about Rubiales and more in a couple of minutes. Hello, part two of the press preview. Zoe and Mary are still with us, and we're going to talk football and the ongoing Spanish scandal, Mary. The front of the Guardian. Actually, the papers are all slightly behind because there's been a development since the first editions came out. We know that the Spanish Football Association saying that he should hand in his resignation, but the Guardian's take on all of it is that there is going to be a sexual assault inquiry over the now infamous Rubiales kiss.
Yeah, and absolutely right. I mean, I think I'm just really angry about this story because it should not have carried on for several days. We all know what we saw on television. It was first of all, it was the crotch-grabbing antics that, in front of the Queen, in front of young children, in front of the whole world. Really, is that what you think is the right behaviour? And then this, which is either sexual harassment or assault, or but yeah, I mean, if this was happening in business, they would have been fired on the spot. It would just have not been accepted. So it's a real shame for the Spanish football ladies. I mean, I think they've done such a brilliant job, and great that our lionesses came out to support them really early on. But good on the Spanish female footballers, because they've in essence gone, we're not playing until he gets fired. So it's about time, and the problem is it makes Spain look bad as part of it. They're not dealing with it quickly. But I'm hoping that this now shows that there might be some movement in it, because it's just unacceptable.
But he still
behaviour.
seems to be standing firm, doesn't he?
Well, he must have made the calculation that he could get her to say that it was consensual if he just stood his ground enough. And certainly, you know, when he made that first statement, when he said, "I will not resign," like 8 times on, when was it, Friday? He did not sound like a man who thought this was going to happen. He definitely thought that he was going to be able to railroad the whole discourse, not just Jenny, but everybody. And it just didn't pan out that way. But it's interesting, because I was talking to my son, who's a teenager, about it. And, you know, obviously any chance to side with a football guy over anybody else on earth, he will take. But he said, you know, if he was a good guy who made a mistake, this wouldn't have happened.
It feels like there's been a build-up.
Exactly.
Over
even though, and I think what we're going to see over the coming days, which he's going to have to resign, right, because the FA has told him to, so there's not really any kind of wiggle room. Yeah. Over the coming days, I think we're going to find out why he was such an unpopular character to begin with.
It's so interesting that the Football Federation supported him and were accusing her of being a liar 2 days ago, and now they've obviously changed their mind and are saying that he's got to go. Just very quickly, front page of the Star, his mum is backing him. What's she doing?
She's gone on a hunger strike in a church, which just goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, I just think, I guess that she's a mother and wants to support her son, but it makes her not look particularly good if that's the sort of behaviour that he has. So,
yes, backing him. Some mamas do have him. That's the headline.